As stewards of public funds, we are ultimately responsible for ensuring that taxpayers see the intended returns on their investment. We need to see results first.
This alternative robs Peter to pay Paul. It is taking from affordable housing providers, from anti-displacement projects, from homeless shelters who are dependent on the payroll expense tax.
Well, those are Seattle City Council members Maritza Rivera and Tammy Morales arguing about a new development this week to introduce a competing measure to go up against I-137, the initiative to fund the city's voter-approved social housing program. Why did the council present this competing measure, and why are supporters of social housing so upset? Plus, how could a new King County housing proposal impact this whole discussion? And how could Seattle have some of the worst traffic, but some of the best drivers, according to some recent studies? Some deep existential questions we're talking about here this week. So much more as well on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on the Seattle channel. The views expressed here are mine, all mine. My co-host David Croman is on leave, so I have a special guest here, Justin Carter, the brains, heart, soul, pancreas, I would imagine, behind the Capitol Hill blog. Justin, how you doing, man? How's life on the Hill?
Pretty good. My liver's feeling good, too. Let's do this.
All right. Sounds good, man. Got all of them here. Thank you, Justin. Thanks also to City Grind Espresso, the background noise sponsor for the audio podcast, which is on the first floor of City Hall. A special thanks to our show patrons. You keep things running here. If you would like access to patrons' first content, well, if you'd like your questions answered on the show, too, you can do that. Become a patron. Support the show on Patreon, Seattle News, Views, and Brews. Thanks also to Converge Media. The video version of the podcast is on Converge Wednesday nights at 7. All right, let's get her going. Time for Right Here, Right Now. Well, we have plenty to cover this week, Justin. We'll talk about soap and soda laws in just a little bit, but front and center, we now have an alternative to I-137 that'll be on the ballot, I should say, in February. Some background here, folks. People gathered signatures this summer to put 137 to a vote. This is a funding mechanism for social housing. Voters approved the creation of social housing last year. But the council had some legal concerns about 137, which would impose a 5% tax on employee pay above $1 million per year. That's paid by employers. This would raise up to $50 million a year to build and purchase housing. So the council's new version, spearheaded by Councilmember Rivera, the alternate version here, would take $10 million in annual proceeds from the existing Jumpstart payroll tax and make sure the funding is administered by the Office of Housing. Plus, it would expire in 5 years. I just want to start with this part first, Justin. We're talking about less money and putting this in the Office of Housing's control rather than a social housing developer. This just seems really different than what proponents of social housing, what they were asking for.
Yeah, and I think that, just listening to your description, I'm going to guess that the average voter tuned out about 2 words into
maybe
it.
Maybe so, yeah.
This is one of these moments in Seattle politics that's, it's interesting to look at because it's so uninteresting in a way. It's so frustrating to see us spending these cycles on this kind of discussion around trying to fund something. We're calling it social housing when the alternative wouldn't really even be the same spirit. The whole point of social housing is to fund a wider variety of affordable housing. And there's the restrictions on this new funding would basically kind of kneecap that. And so, but trying to explain all that and tell the average voter about that. And really what they're going to hear is one side makes a new tax, one side doesn't. One side is bigger, one side is smaller. And so as a journalist, I'm also trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I kind of connect with somebody on that level and then also explain these details?
I got you, man. I do the same thing, and I struggle with it. I gave people all that background because I wanted to make sure people knew what was going on, but you're absolutely right. These can get really confusing. You start talking about average median income and what type of housing connects with that. And I guess that was one that I really keyed in on the discussion that the council was going through this week. So unlike the social housing initiative that was approved last year, the council alternative would actually cap renters' incomes at 80% of the area median income there. So this would be a lot like the other traditional low-income housing programs and not social housing where you have people earning up to 120% of area median income and they subsidize the other renters, basically. I thought that was an important distinction, too, between what social housing proponents were looking at and what the council has proposed here with this alternative.
Yeah, I mean, with this alternative, the council, should it move forward, and it looks like it's got a lot of momentum to go that way, and it sounds like the mayor's into it too.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of the strange descriptions of his general support. It does really snuff out, I think, some of the spirit of what proponents of hoped social housing might be by really restricting the way a core funding element, maybe the only funding element for this developer, how it might be able to move and be able to be spent. And I don't know. I think that before it's even born, it's possible that subtlety is going to be lost on voters. I know it's up to me as a reporter. It's part of it's my job is going to be trying to explain it to constituents and folks who are going to be voting. But it's up to these politicians too, and it's up to the organizations that are going to want the funding. But man, do they have their work cut out for them? And it's coming up in a time, a year or two, in a February vote. That's another thing the council was able to do, is kind of push this into a vote with lower turnout. I think it's going to really face a big challenge. I think this really is a risk to snuffing out social housing here in Seattle before it even got started.
And just in looking at that, the whole idea of rating the Jumpstart payroll tax, I know this is going to be a spot that the council goes to quite a bit, or at least that's my take on it when they look at the different budget pitfalls they have ahead here. $260 million in the hole here. Do you have any thoughts about that, about taking money from Jumpstart? I know we're going to talk a lot about this during the budget proceedings this fall, but taking money from Jumpstart to go into a priority like this, I think Councilmember Morales said it was kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul a little bit on this deal.
Yeah, I'm not the most biblical person, so I was thinking more of the little story we read when we were kids about everybody who found a penny and put it in their pocket. But it turns out they're all dropping the same penny and picking up the same penny, and they get to the candy store and they still have one penny. Jumpstart turned out to be a pretty wise decision for Seattle City Hall, given what happened to us coming out of the pandemic, and now it's an irresistible pool. I think that nothing should be religious when it comes to the money, and that what I mean is that no one said Jumpstart had to always be restricted to the things it was born with around housing and social services, but I do wish we would be more careful with something that we've clearly just grown to really need. And that caution, I not necessarily seen it, and especially now it's so quickly become the only tool they could come up with as far as an alternative on social housing. To me, it shows a lack of imagination, if nothing else.
Yeah. And I mean, another point too about Jumpstart is it's a pretty volatile form of revenue gathering when you talk about it. When you talk about companies doing really well, sure, we're going to have a big boost in income there, but maybe when they don't and the stocks go the other way, it can be volatile in that direction too. So thanks for breaking down all those different pieces with me, Justin. I did want to talk about another twist on this whole story, though, because King County has a new housing proposal that sounds a lot like social housing. So we've got County Council Member Gurmai Zahalai, who wants to ask Executive Dow Constantine to set up a regional workforce housing initiative that will use at least $1 billion of the county's $9 billion in debt capacity to build permanently affordable housing at a variety of income levels. Does that sound familiar? Zahalai is saying, like social housing, higher rent units would subsidize lower rent units, would be available to people making up to 120% of the area median income. And I guess the big difference with this one, Justin, is there isn't a new tax that would be used to pay for this program. I wanted your thoughts on what the county's working on, because it sounds a lot like social housing.
Yeah, it's a different recipe. I mean, debt is it can be a powerful financial and economic tool. So I mean, governments should put it to work when they can. The things that struck me about this proposal is some of the big numbers. I mean, you see a subject line with 1 billion in it, and you kind of almost it's almost harder to engage with. It just seems so large. I think this also is just another. If you look at it in a really big picture, we've gone through a period where we tried to kind of attack affordability from maybe the lowest levels and trying to really, and there still are, and clearly that crisis is still there. This does show at least one recipe for kind of addressing different income levels and higher income levels than we might have first thought of when it came to affordable housing. But in an area like Seattle, in an area like King County, that affordability crisis, it goes beyond just the lowest income levels, and it does go into these next tiers, and how we go about that, I think, is what this kind of thing is going to define.
Yep. And I think so many people will tell you that a lot of times when that person at that higher income level can't afford a certain place, they'll end up pushing out that lower income level such that you end up down renting. I've heard that term called a lot of different times, and you'll push people right out of the city or into homelessness a lot of times when that happens. There's one other piece with this that I thought was interesting, Justin, because Zaha Ali's plan wouldn't create a new developer, a new social housing developer, but would exist or work with the existing public developers like the King County Housing Authority, et cetera. And I just got to that bigger issue. If that's maybe a part of this for local lawmakers, they don't want to set up another bureaucracy in the affordable housing space. Do you think that's part of the consideration here too?
Definitely. And I mean, there's some, just generally looking at an environment and efficiencies, those kinds of things can make a lot of sense. You can also look at it from kind of the entrenched bureaucracy and what's powerful from a political standpoint, and see that those kinds of entities might be outsized in the debate and maybe pull too much weight, and really just looking at trying to preserve themselves. I guess I'm willing to say I kind of have a dog in the fight. I'm interested in watching to see how those powers kind of play out, and maybe they, if they can fight for it, maybe they deserve it. If you look at it from that kind of environment, maybe they're still strong enough and nimble enough and can change, and it will force them to change, maybe to address more of the crisis than they have so far.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that, Justin. All right, up next, we're talking about not one, but two lists of possible school closures in Seattle. The news is not great with either option, but we're going to discuss what Seattle Public Schools has presented coming up on Now Hear This. Well, late last week, Seattle Public Schools released two lists of potential elementary school closures for the fall of next year. As we have reported on this podcast, SPS is in the middle of roughly a $100+ million budget hole right now, looking to make some cuts to save some dollars as enrollment has dropped and not completely recovered after the pandemic. I asked Superintendent Brent Jones about how our public schools ended up in this situation earlier this summer.
So the times when we were in the black, if you will, was due to the fact that we actually had one-time funds available. Those one-time funds aren't available. So this is tantamount to a structural deficit. We're spending more than we're bringing in. And our revenue, if you will, is about enrollment. And if our enrollment goes down and we don't have supplemental funds to make up that net loss, we have a deficit.
Justin, you reported on this in the Capitol Hill blog, and there's one school in particular, Stevens Elementary, that's on both of these lists from Seattle Public Schools, unfortunately. And I know this is something that you've been looking at for many years, because schools, or families, I should say, connected to Stevens School have been dreading this day for many years. I just wanted to get your take on, I guess, the reaction from families around Capitol Hill when you look at these two plans.
Sure. Stevens, made kind of the ignominious list there, along with McGillivray and a few other schools of making both. The families of Stevens, the writing has been on the wall for lots of reasons. One, it does have enrollment issues. It's a more expensive area in the city. There's not as much multi-family housing available here and those kinds of things. But the district had also kind of put its finger on the scale years ago, where it redid its attendance boundaries to move more families away from Stevens. So some of these directions have been there as the school district has looked to kind of winnow out its smallest campuses and move to more efficient neighborhood schools, larger schools to have more students there. So families have had an opportunity to kind of brace themselves and prepare, but I think the work really is beginning now for more serious pushback, because the proposal has finally been released and it's finally something in the public sphere. So Stevens Elementary is a big area of pushback, but the McGillivray School nearby, serving the Madison Valley families in that area, that school has also really brought a rally of support, and I think there'll be a lot of attention paid to figuring out a solution for families around there who are really concerned. They spent a lot of money to live in these areas. They really sacrificed so much, and so all these changes now could mean that those plans are going to be cut away.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting. Danny Westneat had a good point about this in the Seattle Times, and saying, so we're going through this consolidation of schools, and when you look at the option schools, they have the specialized curriculum and all that. SPS is, at least in his opinion, creating more of a cookie cutter thing that, all right, all schools have to be the same. We're trying to be equitable, which is important. But could that lack of having those specialized option schools drive more students away? I just wanted to talk about that. Again, I get the importance of trying to be equitable from the school's perspective. But then again, they're trying to offer something that is special, that is different, that is unique. And I don't know if getting rid of the option schools and the K through 8 schools, I don't know if that's the way. What do you think of these plans?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that equity is a core element in the campuses they've decided to cut and the campuses they've decided to try to keep as this plan gets pushed forward. The idea of slicing away option schools, driving more families away, is probably accurate. There is one thing to be said about it around that idea, though, that these specialized schools and these resources that more families that might flee are taking advantage of from the district. It is an interesting little bit of, I don't know, jujitsu almost, if you think about it from the district's perspective, to say, yeah, we're not going to supply these special things anymore and push those back out into the private sphere and these charter schools that have seen so much growth. And I'd be kind of interested to see in 10 years how it could be an opportunity for the market, or it could also be a real burden for a lot of these private schools and these Catholic schools that are so strong here in Seattle. And if you're a bitter public school parent in Seattle, not that that's me or anything, some ways, I'm kind of curious to see what happens when St. Joseph's School has to deal with and support more of those kinds of programs. And yeah, that's what it feels like. But at the same time, these are families, and these are kids, and I try and bury those kinds of bitter thoughts away. And I hope that the district can make solutions that, you're talking. It's kind of crazy how little money it is. You're talking about saving. I know it's 30 million's a ton. But 30 million in the scheme of things is so small, and
it doesn't match up with the 100 plus million that they need to save here. I mean, that's an important part of this too.
It's a real moment. Again, if you make the mistake of sitting back and looking at it, it's a real bummer for the city that we're talking about this much pain over that little money. It kind of really does show some of the structural issues that we're still facing that will need to be fixed, despite you forget about any campuses that are closed or open.
Right. And just some fixes that need to happen at a state level too. When you talk about how that funding works, it's dependent on students, folks, and if they don't have enough students in there, then that funding goes down. That's just the simple math going on behind that. So, yeah, I know that's something that a lot of groups are going to be pushing back on. And watch out for these school board meetings that are coming up in the next couple of weeks here. Those are going to be rocking. Those are going to be crazy. I wanted to move on to another topic that I covered last week on the podcast here, Justin. New soda and soap laws getting passed through to the full council here. So we're talking stay out of drug areas, that's soda, stay out of areas of prostitution, that's soap. The council repealed these measures 5 years ago, and the new council is bringing them back with gross misdemeanor punishments, including up to 364 days in jail and a $5,000 fine. The committees passed them unanimously last week. And I thought this was interesting, Justin. Councilmember Hollingsworth, whose District 3 area includes Capitol Hill, asked for a soda zone stretching from Harvard to 11th Ave, including Cal Anderson Park. I just wanted your take on this, because you've reported news in this town for a while, from the time when these laws were repealed to now, when they've come back, apparently. What effect do you think laws like this will have?
A lot of the things we've seen in like emphasis areas from any kind of enforcement, it's the toothpaste rule. You squeeze one place, then the toothpaste emerges at another. And in fact, one of the areas we used to see this was what they would sometimes call the open air drug marketplace of 23rd and Union.
Yes.
One that's kind of amazing about Hollingsworth's proposal that seems well on its way to be passed and going to be part of the Capitol Hill framework here, and having soda here in the neighborhood. One thing that's amazing to me, and that is that actually like a decade ago, this probably would have been something we were talking about in the Central District. And it is interesting the shift in the way things have gone with street disorder and crime, that the appetite for the communities around there, especially the business communities in the area of where the Capitol Hill soda would cover around Cal Anderson Park and Capitol Hill Light Rail Station, that there's an appetite for that at all there is incredible, and is quite an interesting change for the district that this is a Capitol Hill soda and not a Central District soda for D3. To me is remarkable, just for part of the change that's gone on. As far as it's failed in the city, Capitol Hill around the park and around Cal Anderson hasn't seen this kind of emphasis before. So it's been interesting to hear from businesses and community groups in the area that are a little more open-minded around soda, despite the idea of it as being kind of this failed legislative effort from the past. So
people want to do something. I keep on hearing that.
There's a real sense of just trying something, which is it's almost never a good idea in city government. But man, people are exhausted around Pike Pines Corn, around Broadway. I think there's a bit of an appetite for this, even if it is a failed soda.
Fair enough. Any take on the soap laws? It looks like a lot of this is focused on North Aurora, where we're seeing more prostitution, et cetera. Yeah. Councilmember Moore says she wants to put this in place to try to deal with Johns, deal with sex traffickers, and also try to cut back on gun violence. Some thoughts about what's going on there?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on Aurora other than being a citizen of the city. And I do understand the optics of it for families or people just driving along Aurora. Mm-hmm. But that isn't soda. The risk of soda is also just a social failure. The lives involved with what could happen around soap, that can be extremely frustrating for the experts around sex workers and people from the industry. And so, the thoughts there are just, it's frustrating to me that so many of these communities that are trying to help around Aurora and really are experts there aren't involved in this. The prostitution isn't limited to Aurora. I mean, we have it. It's part of District 3. It's part of Capitol Hill. It's so much of it's digital and so much of it's online. And it's just I'm curious to see really just what new problems the city will create with this. And I guess I'm looking at that less as a journalist and more as someone who, I drive with my kids on Aurora, and it's definitely, it can bring some interesting conversations. But, I guess one thing I don't want to have to tell them about is, what happens when you force this kind of stuff underground. What happens when you make people desperate is can be really bad and really ugly, and that's the thing that I worry about when it comes to soap.
Yeah, it's just a new approach from this council, Justin, and it's not. I don't think it's any surprise really. They're leading with a law enforcement style. You know what I mean? That's the way they want to engage with these.
Well, it's a new approach for how we've seen the city council now.
That's right, over the past 4 years. Right.
It almost makes that we realize the last 10 years was the weird time on city council.
Yeah, maybe, right? I'm sure a lot of people were saying that, yeah.
Yeah, this echoes way more with what I remember about what the city council did before the Shama Sawant era and those kinds of things.
Yeah, but it's your concern that potentially with laws like this, it could push more of these types of things into the darkness and could potentially cause more problems, or what's your thought there?
I mean that I think so. Also, not an expert on this, but the studies that I have been able to read around this, and also common sense, you can see that it's going to push the economy that is growing up around Aurora, more into the shadows and more into the away from services and away from help. I don't think that's what that street needs. Though it needs energy, it needs help, it needs love, it needs money.
Yeah.
But this feels like sending cops, and I thought we'd learned more about that in the last 20 years. But some lessons need to be repeated.
Interesting. I'm very interested to see that too, Justin. That's a new step for the city council here, new step for the city attorney's office, and we'll see how that plays through. But it's moving ahead for the council here, folks, ahead of their budget discussions that are coming up next week. All right, well, coming up, talking about traffic congestion in Seattle. We all know it's terrible. That's nothing new. But is it true that our city has some of the country's best drivers? That's got to be a typo. I don't believe it. We're going to get into it coming up on What's Next. Justin, I saw this headline recently about Seattle having some of the worst traffic congestion in the country, second worst, according to the annual numbers from the Consumer Affairs Report. It says that Seattle has almost 7 hours of average daily congestion on its roads. compared to the national average of 3 hours and 41 minutes. And I believe 7 hours is roughly the amount of time it takes to drive up Madison from downtown to Madison Park. I don't know if that for sure, but I think that's pretty close. Are you ever surprised by these congestion numbers, Justice? They just seem never to get any better.
Yeah, you know, I mean, the best part about traffic is when you look around and say, "What's with all this traffic?" It's your traffic, so that explains that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no, and the more capacity to build, the more people are going to go out and drive on it. And plus, we're a weird city. You know, we've got water and bridges and
different things are kind of get in the way.
And also, though, the part I don't believe though is, I mean, I've been outside. Occasionally, I leave Capitol Hill. Believe it or not.
True story.
And
okay.
Occasionally I get out of Seattle. Like, I was in Dallas this summer, and Dallas is ridiculous. Like, the traffic, like, people just sit in their car. It was worse than Los Angeles. And I know I was only there for a weekend, but it was just, they're all used to it. It's clearly normal. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know where they're measuring exactly. Like I'm pretty sure that all major American cities are pretty much massively hosed when it comes to traffic.
Yeah, I would say, but there was another part of this that I was reminded of. The Seattle Times had a link to this, a report that came out from Allstate Insurance that said our city was third best in the country when it came to safe drivers. The data they're looking at, speeding over 80 miles an hour, sudden braking, using a phone while on the road. And this is just one of those studies where I'm not buying it. Do you think Seattle is home to some of the country's safest drivers? What do you got?
No, that's clearly a metrics problem. They need different measurements. Like, they should just put the sensor in the middle of the crosswalk. Like, so I you know, and Capitol Hill is famous for our darting pedestrians. But, you know, it's because we're here to. The cops aren't going to enforce the law, so we're going to. And just going by that measurement alone, no, Seattle drivers are not. I don't know where they're supposedly ranked, but no, you're bad, Seattle drivers, and I'm talking to myself. I also know, like,
look in the mirror, right?
It is and you know, part of it's also, though, I do like. I love our paint jobs on our city streets now, and the Super Mario Kartification of the city streets.
Totally, yeah.
Like, you can tell the locals are confused enough, but you can tell so fast with the poor tourists when they're driving here. Like, when they see the lime green and the rainbow.
Yeah, I thought green means go. No, that's a bike lane, sir. Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All I'd say is definitely, if you see California plates and you're in a crosswalk, just keep moving, get out of the way.
Now, when you say darting pedestrians, do you mean that pedestrians are carrying like dart guns and they're shooting out the tires of cars as they go by?
No, that's a good. No, we prefer cobbles and bricks for that.
Yes.
But yeah, we definitely will defend ourselves aggressively. It's cultural up here.
Yeah, for sure. Justin, thank you so much. I need to wrap up with you, but I wanted to ask about this. I saw you post recently after the news that Amazon is going to require employees to be back in person 5 days a week at the start of the year. You were saying that the Capitol Hill blog requires 8 days a week, which seems like a pretty intense work week. What's the story there, man?
We wanted to raise the bar, not only for Seattle media, who we've noticed has been slacking, but really for the city as a whole, as we wanted a leadership. We want to see more revenue spent in our city. And so, yes, we work 8 days a week here.
I like it, man. That's in person, whether you like it or not. That's more than 7 days. I was trying to figure out how you did the math
John, just like the Beatles.
Yeah, I like it. Some Space Needle thinking going on there. Watch out, Justin. That's
me. Space Needle thinking.
Big. That's big. That's Justin Carter, and he is joining me here on Seattle News, Views, and Brews. Justin, thanks a million, man. I appreciate you doing this.
Thanks very much for having me. It's fun to talk.
All right, as always. Thank you, Justin. Thanks to everybody who is listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews, the podcast where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Thanks again, to patrons who support the show. If you're not a patron, get with it, folks. Find this podcast on Patreon, Seattle News, Views, and Brews. You can hear us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you like to listen. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media. We'll see you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2024.